All right, everyone, we are driving it home. Again, we are filming live from the basement of the secret detention facility at Abu Ghraib. No, I'm only kidding. I'm in my basement. My ductwork still needs work. I have Dave Jacobs on with me. Dave Jacobs is the owner of Dave Jacobs Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, a longtime black belt, a friend. I believe, and he'll be able to correct me if I'm factually wrong, he wrestled at American University.
Franklin and Marshall.
Pardon me, Franklin and Marshall. See
Went to
that?
law school at American.
I knew there was some connection to American. Okay.
Yeah.
So Dave is a high-level competitor, high-level referee, very conscientious Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school owner. Before I got started today, kind of getting the show prepped, I was thinking, when did I meet Dave? And I'm pretty sure if I didn't meet you in the airport in Rio in '99 or 2000, I might have met you at a tournament before. But I think what resonated with me and how we kind of started to become friends was kind of running into each other at the airport, and you guys were wearing your jumpsuits. It was all pretty cute. So I present to everyone a dear friend, a hell of a jiu-jitsu man, Dave Jacobs, and if anything he'd like to add to what I just said about him.
Yeah, I think it was '99 in Rio. That's when I think I first met you and Anai, and was Jared down there as well that year.
I believe so. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, I met the Philly crew in '99 in Rio, and boy, what an amazing trip that was. That was my first time to Brazil and first time at a World Championships. And I don't know about you, but it completely blew me away, that trip. It was fantastic. It just blew me away.
It was one of those times, and I haven't competed nearly as much as you have, and we'll get into your competition career in a little bit, but it was one of the times where I'd been so nervous before a competition that I almost broke out into tears, right? Just being so scared of being in the motherland of this art that we loved and being a blue belt, and man, this is for all the marbles here. And I look back on it and I really relish the fact that I lived that moment and that I was that kind of nervous and scared, and really informs me to who I am today. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I competed there too, and just the whole experience. I actually brought my wife down there, and we did a little bit of sightseeing. But being able to go to the World Championships at the Tijuca Tennis Club and seeing all the big famous names, and we visited Gracie Barra in Barra da Tijuca, and it was an amazing trip. I'm really fond memories of that trip.
So now this wasn't anything that we talked about in the green room, as we call it.
Yeah, the pre-interview.
But for you, what was the big kind of like, wow, this is different about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil as opposed to what you were exposed to here in the States?
I think the first time I had that feeling was actually before we went to Brazil, when we went to the Pan Ams, the 1999 Pan Ams in Miami. And at that time, when I was training at the Yamazaki Academy, Mario Yamazaki was the black belt, and all the students were white belts and blue belts. We didn't have anybody higher than a blue belt. And when I went to the Pan Ams and saw all these black belts competing and brown belts who were doing higher level jiu-jitsu than we white belts and blue belts, I thought, wow, it almost doesn't look like the same sport that I'm doing, but very cool. And motivated me to improve my jiu-jitsu. And I'm looking down in the corner here because that's where you're a little tiny.
Yes, yeah. If you, like I told Renato Laranja, if you look up at the green light, it looks better. Yeah.
Now it looks like I'm looking at the audience.
The hundreds of people that'll watch this.
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting, because my first exposure to high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from a competitive standpoint was, videotapes that you kind of got in '99, '98, and watching these techniques. But it was being in Brazil at the World Championships. A lot of the guys at our school, like the first real competition they did was the Worlds, and kind of thinking about that now, it's a little insane. but an interesting kind of trip nonetheless, and how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has changed, but also kind of I think your original lineage Yamazaki was a little bit more progressive to the competitive field than we were, being coming from like the Torrance Gracie kind of sit and wait and be patient, and those kinds of things don't work with a 6-minute match or a 7-minute match. So I think you might have been a little bit better prepared, especially also being a wrestler that had competed. You kind of personally, as opposed to just your school preparation, you had a leg up maybe on some people.
Mm. Yeah, the wrestling certainly helped. I wrestled my whole life, even through college, and it definitely helps you prepare mentally, physically, and perhaps that helped. Now also technique-wise, it gives you a very good base, of course. You don't have to worry about getting choked out in wrestling. Excuse me one second. Let me turn off this phone. Sorry.
What a beginner at media you are.
Sorry. Is that still going?
Yeah, that's fine. But what'll happen is, in the future, I'll just ask everybody to silence their phones.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that.
So, again, going off course a little bit, but I think staying within our general framework. How did the connection come? You were a wrestler, right, and then you got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How did that happen?
So after graduating college, there was no more wrestling, and Jiu-Jitsu had not yet splashed into America. So I just lifted weights, pretty much, did some rock climbing, and believe it or not, even did some kickboxing, and I was the world's worst kickboxer. I finally, like most people of our Jiu-Jitsu generation, saw the UFC and saw the guys doing jiu-jitsu and thought, boy, that really looks like wrestling. Very cool. Looks like a wrestling martial art. Let me see if I can find someone around here in the D.C. area. And I found Mario Yamazaki, and this was in I started jiu-jitsu in February of '98. So probably towards the end of '97, I started looking around, got my curiosity up, and found Mario and started taking jiu-jitsu, and that was pretty much the beginning of the journey.
So let me ask you, the first day that you walked into the Yamazaki Academy, did you walk in kind of saying, all right, I'm a wrestler, what are these guys going to show me? Or, man, this is really cool, I want to learn this? Or were you kind of, were you the guy with an open, well, not open ears because your ears are all messed up, but an open mind, or a guy going, you know what, these people are going to have to prove to me that what they do is better than wrestling?
It's actually a little bit of both. I know that sounds contradictory, but like many wrestlers, I had a little bit of cockiness, and because of all the weightlifting, I thought I was so strong and I was going to go in there and just smash everyone, but I still wanted to learn it. And I went in there and I got guillotined I don't know how many times in a row, because it's something you just simply don't consider in wrestling. No one's going to guillotine you in wrestling. And wrestlers lead with their head, and I came in, and I kept getting guillotined, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I've never experienced this before, and I want to come back and try it again. So that was pretty much it.
All right, so you went in there, it sounds like, hoping that it would be what you wanted, and they proved it. That's awesome. That's exactly, and that's why you're here however many years later.
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier, like Star Wars, let's get back to the end, and we'll work our way back. You currently own Dave Jacobs Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, correct?
That is correct.
All right. What's the state of Dave Jacobs Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What's going on there right now? How's the school going? What are classes like? Give the people that would be interested to hearing about your school, like what's going on.
Well, we're located in the Tysons Corner area of Vienna, Virginia, which is a Washington, D.C. suburb, right off one of the metro lines, easy access, where you can drive there, of course. We recently had our one-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm absolutely ecstatic, thrilled, happy about the way the academy is going. It's a blast. I have fantastic, wonderful students. I have fantastic, wonderful instructors, and we're growing and going to be adding more classes soon. What specifics can I answer for you? My instructors, let me tell you who my instructors are. And
Sure.
it's always great when the owner of the academy, whose name, I like to say this, whose name is on the academy, has instructors teaching who are better than he is. So I have Brendan Rady, who is also a Division I wrestler. He's a first-degree black belt.
High-level jiu-jitsu competitor as
High-level
well.
jiu-jitsu guy, purple belt world champion, brown belt, bronze medalist. Finished, forgive me, Brendan, finished pretty high in, I think, the Abu Dhabi trials. Just fantastic technique. And Abimar Barbosa, who needs no introduction. I can't imagine anyone listening to this who doesn't know who Abimar is. But
But you know what? Why don't we let's act like some of these people might not know who Admar Barbosa is and why it's important that he is an instructor at your school.
Abimar, who's been a friend of mine for 9 years, is one of the elite competitors in jiu-jitsu in the world. Has all kinds of instructional DVDs and even has abimaronline.com, free plug for Abimar, that you can sign up for. Just a great competitor, great coach. I've competed a lot in jiu-jitsu and have done the masters and seniors many times and kept getting bronze and silvers and bronze. And when I started training with Abimar, I started winning gold, and I think there's a direct correlation with that. My jiu-jitsu really took off.
So he's on the regular schedule there to
Yes.
teach on, so he's got certain days that he teaches and people come to, not saying like
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. So it's not like, you have somebody's name on your door and
Right.
he comes in every 6 months or
No. He lives in the area. He's there 3 to 4 times a week. If he wakes up early enough to make it to the open mat. Well, he's there almost every day, but as far as teaching goes, if he wakes up early enough to get to the open mat, he's usually at the open mat as well.
So you got Brandon Rady, high-level competitor,
Yeah.
Abmar Barbosa, who, if you're into jiu-jitsu, you know who he is.
Yeah.
Anybody else you have teaching for you at this point?
No, it's just the 3 of us handling all the classes. Hopefully soon we'll be getting another black belt who will be returning back to the States from his stint overseas, and he will be teaching with us as well. Garrett Beck, who's a very good competitor and technician, who will be with us as well.
So, Dave, you've had your school for a year, and you kind of this is new to you, and it's not new to you. It's new to you being kind of the guy at your own school, right?
Yes.
The main guy where everything falls on you, and this is definitely a positive. Kind of, what have you taken away from this year personally, but also professionally in your jiu-jitsu, saying, hey, you know what, now I'm doing things my way. These are the things that I really push at my school that I can push. I don't have to ask anybody or, do the committee to make sure that this gets run through. What's Dave Jacobs Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now like that it's really Dave Jacobs Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
That's a great question. I could go on for days about answering, but I'll try to summarize as best as possible. But I've been able to implement my vision of what I think a jiu-jitsu academy should be. I've been running an academy this literally 10 years now, since 2004. I started when I was a brown belt, opening an academy, and I started this new one about a year ago. Let's see. You've asked me kind of an open-ended question. Let me try to give you some specifics. I mean, the first way to answer is, I think, something you touched on in the beginning, or at least we talked about in the green room. I get to implement my vision for what a jiu-jitsu academy is. I have a certain philosophies I've had are different from the old school traditional mentality. An example being, I try to be very involved with the community and have my students involved in the jiu-jitsu community. Our open mats on Saturday are open to all students, regardless of affiliation or team. We
So
try to get
I don't.
everyone to train together.
Let me cut you off there, just because we do a Sunday that's open for everybody, and that's great. But there's some people that might be coming into this that don't train at a progressive or don't train with a progressive instructor, that their instructor tells them certain things. Like, what does it mean to the student when someone is kind of closed-minded, as opposed to what you and I do, where we try to be open-minded and accepting? Like, what are the two major differences there from a student perspective?
Well, at some academies, instructors frown upon their students visiting training at other schools, local schools. Everybody seems to accept if you move out of the area or take a vacation to California, you can train there. But even in the local D.C. area, I've told my students, because I've had people come to my academy at Open Mats, and they say, thanks, Dave, but please don't post any pictures of me being here. Don't tell anyone I'm here, because if it gets back to my instructor will be upset. And I say, okay, I won't say anything. And that happened enough times that I made an announcement to my students. I said, listen, this is what's happened from other people who have visited here. I don't want you guys to ever feel this. If you guys want to go visit another local school, you're welcome to. I don't restrict. You're adults. What you do with your time is your business. I'm not here to govern your life. If you want to visit another local academy, take a class there or take classes there. You can. I mean, it's your decision. You run your own life. So that's, some instructors very much frown upon this kind of thing, and this is what I'm saying, where I like for my students to be involved in the community, because I think it helps their learning. It helps their jiu-jitsu to be exposed to different styles and different students. It only benefits the students, benefits my academy.
And then I think it benefits the community as well. You know what I'm saying? Because look, as much as we're friends, if our students compete against each other, and we've competed against each other, it's like we're still friends before, we're still friends after.
Absolutely.
We're competing during, right?
Yes.
And I want to win, you want to win, your student wants to win, my student wants to win. So what's the big deal if they're visiting somewhere else, right? I heard once, I heard a guy say, look, I don't care if he knows what I'm good at. I'm still going to continue being good at it. That, just because he knows my game a little bit doesn't mean that he's going to be able to stop it. So that was always the argument. Well, if they see our secrets, or if they see this takedown that I'm good at, they're going to be able to stop it. Well, then maybe the takedown's not that good, or that technique's not that good, that if they've seen it a couple times, they can defend it. So
I agree 100%. 100%. I can't emphasize that enough. I've never had a problem with competing against someone I've trained with, and being aggressive competitor on the mat, but shaking hands and being best buds afterwards. I don't see that as an issue at all. It doesn't bother me.
So you have an open door policy at your school. You have the Saturday open mat. Sounds like if people are coming in from out of town, come and visit your school. If they're in the local DC area and they feel like visiting, they could come visit your school. And if they ask you not to say anything, you'll respect that and not say
Absolutely.
anything. Okay.
I'm not trying to, my philosophy is for me and my students, but if they want to, if they feel uncomfortable, they don't want their picture on the internet or whatever, that's perfectly fine. I'm happy to oblige, and I want them to still come visit,
Right. So now that you kind of, that's part of to me, I think that's the biggest thing that you can be proud of, is that, the school directly reflects who you are. Right? It's always a top-down idea. So you have an open door policy. Your students have an open mind, right, to training with other people, learning from other people. Technically, what do you think the differences are, or not even so much the differences, but kind of like, what kind of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school do you run? Do you run an MMA-based Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school? Do you run a self-defense-based Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school? Is it a sport-based? Is it a little bit of everything? Like, what's kind of going on from a technical standpoint?
All right. Interesting question. There was just a huge internet discussion on this issue, as there is every other week, about self-defense and sport jiu-jitsu. Very common thread in the jiu-jitsu community. I would say that I run primarily a sport-based jiu-jitsu what some would call a sport-based jiu-jitsu academy. But in my mind, the self-defense is intricately woven into that sport curriculum. I don't think there's any sport jiu-jitsu competitor who doesn't know self-defense. Even if you take the most, a famous, infamous move that is very sport-based, that everyone would say would never work in a self-defense context, is the berimbolo. You could never do that if you were on the street. But it seems to me that anyone who does sport jiu-jitsu who knows how to do a berimbolo, which, by the way, I can't do. I would love to be able to do a berimbolo, but physically it's not happening.
Okay.
But anyone who does a berimbolo knows not to do this on the street and could certainly handle himself on the street with basic jiu-jitsu takedown, rear naked choke, or whatever. So I think part of this, I guess this is a long, drawn-out way of saying this whole debate of sport versus self-defense is a little bit artificial and phony. I just don't buy into it. I mean, yes, there's sport moves, there's self-defense moves, but the argument seems to be based on this idea. Well, if you do sport jiu-jitsu, you're in a mindset that you won't understand that you can't do a berimbolo on the street. I mean, it's just it's a ridiculous debate.
I never thought of the argument like that, and I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not that in tune with what's going on in the internet jiu-jitsu communities anymore, other than the fact hopefully they're enjoying my show, and if they're not, too bad for me. But and more so, it's been Hicks and Gracie that's been kind of spearheading from what I could tell lately, like the videos and the JJGF and all this other stuff. But it almost feels like what he's been saying, my interpretation is it's not so much that the sport athletes can't do self-defense, it's that the curriculum doesn't have the techniques of self-defense interwoven to be able to make them kind of effective. Not that the moves aren't effective, it's that the moves that are only self-defense aren't being taught. I don't know if that is, if you agree or disagree with what my interpretation of what he's saying is.
Yeah, I've seen those interviews posted. I haven't listened to them. I don't know. I tend to think, I think most blue belts, purple belts would be pretty good at getting out of a headlock.
Right, but I'm saying, but if they've never been all right, so but then the counter argument is if they've never had a sucker punch thrown at them, you know what I'm saying? Like getting a punch thrown at your face is a bit different than a self-defense aspect from a headlock or that kind of thing. Right. But again, but I agree with you. I think that a sport guy is prepared enough for a street altercation. He's not going to get beat up by some random bum in Virginia.
Another important question is we talk about self-defense as if it's one type of situation. There's a universe of self-defense scenarios that many of which jiu-jitsu is completely ineffective. If you want to do true self-defense, get a gun. Because there's certain self-defense situations where you're going to need lethal force, and jiu-jitsu is not going to be it. Or you better have good running shoes.
Okay, no, all right. I mean, I completely get it.
Yeah, maybe jiu-jitsu is good for one-on-one guy attacks you, but there's so many. Like I said, there's a universe of scenarios where jiu-jitsu, even the self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu is good at preparing you for one type of scenario, but there's so many that, boxing is good.
And the other thing too is that it's not, there's a big difference between, self-defense, martial arts, and combatives. And combatives are those high-stress situations and all that other stuff. So, we got into your philosophy of kind of being open and that kind of stuff, but now you have a lot on your plate, right? You have 2 kids, right? Three. Sorry, pardon me. Three children, 1 wife, right?
Yes.
1 jiu-jitsu academy, and a full-time job. Now, how do you juggle all that still actively referee,
Yes.
still, train, still have time to do interviews, be on Facebook, internet, and all that other stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what's up?
Yeah. I of course watched your interview with Steve Bowers, my good friend.
It was
My
awful,
good
wasn't it?
friend.
It was painful.
Yeah. We have parallel lives. He's also, a lawyer during the day, Jiu-Jitsu Academy owner at night, 3 children, one wife. Right. The one wife that he admits to.
Right.
Right.
You guys are boring with that one wife stuff.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, look, finding the balance is always a challenge, and I'm always, how do I put this tactfully, as I'm sure Steve is as well, and other people in our position, we are always reminded that we need to keep a better balance.
So here's a better way to always thankful that our better halves are
Yes,
happy with what we're doing.
yes, of course. Yeah, I'm also, by the way, just to add, uh, I'm also assistant wrestling coach for my son's wrestling program. I do that a couple nights a week because I didn't, I actually had a couple of hours open during the week that had to be immediately filled.
With grappling.
Yes, with grappling. So I help out with my son's wrestling team as well.
So
Um,
how do you juggle all this? Do you have a day timer? Do you kind of, what do you do?
yeah, it's look, it's difficult, but if you love what you're doing, if you're happy with what you're doing, it's a labor of love, I guess is the way to put it. Um,
If your
so
wife wasn't supportive, how difficult would this be?
yeah, impossible, impossible. I'm very fortunate. Uh, you know,
Dave, that's called a layup I gave you right there. Okay,
yes,
so keep
it's
going with
right.
it. All right.
Yeah, very. Look, honestly, I appreciate the layup, but it is absolutely true. I could not have stumbled into a better marriage, life partner, whatever you want to call it, than my wife, who's very supportive of me, and definitely. Right, I couldn't do all that I'm doing if I didn't have the support at home. So.
So you mentioned earlier back, I think you said in '99 you brought your wife to Brazil, right?
Yes.
Um, so you were there to compete. Let's get into your competition career. Kind of, you said you wrestled your whole life. You got into some bodybuilding, some kickboxing, and you found jiu-jitsu through the UFC, and then you continued to compete. Kind of what drove you to continue competing once you started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Right. A couple different factors. One is, there are people who are adrenaline junkies. That's what does it for them, to jump out of an airplane or do some crazy thing. For me, it's always been competition and winning that competition. It's like a shot of pure elation directly into the pleasure center of your brain when you compete and do well and win. It's just fantastic. There's nothing that can equal that feeling. But I also like the preparation, the hard training, pushing yourself. That's a part of it as well. Pushing yourself beyond your limits, seeing where you can go, doing killing yourself in workouts, and I know I push myself as hard as I could possibly go. It's a very good feeling. So I guess those are.
Now that pushing yourself as hard as you can go. I've talked to, I've had some high-level wrestlers on, people that were on the Olympic Training Center, guys that wrestled Division I in Penn, people that kind of thing, and they all seem to really agree that there is no hard work like there is that comes from wrestling, or that mindset of wanting to work hard and pushing and pushing and pushing. There's no kind of as hard as the jiu-jitsu guys might work, they're saying that the guys in the wrestling room work harder and push even past. Do you find that to be the truth?
I think for many, I'm speculating a little bit. I can, I want to. Hard for me to go outside of my own experience.
Of course, right.
From what I've seen around different academies, that's frequently true. It's not impossible. The benefit of wrestling in college is that it's like your job. You don't have any other responsibilities at that point yet, except for your studies. You just have, wrestling, and you can wrestle 2-3 times a day. And your coach there's a person who's paid there, your coach, to push you as hard as you can go. For jiu-jitsu, for many people, it's more of a hobby, a casual hobby. Whereas in wrestling, everyone's there for one purpose, to be on the team and to win as much as they can. For jiu-jitsu, you have a broader range of goals and experiences, so everyone is not necessarily on the same page in terms of competition, and an academy owner or an instructor has to accommodate all these different goals and experiences. So, excuse me. Now, if you have a competition team in jiu-jitsu, it's a little easier to set up a curriculum and a framework where people are on the same page and you can push everyone to that higher level. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It doesn't. It leads me into the next one then. So as your experience as a coach, and you've been teaching for the last 10 years, have you seen the push, right? When it was time to push harder and push your competition team through the sticking points, were the wrestlers the guys that kind of were stepping up first, and then the other guys coming up behind them, or that kind of thing? Or did you see people kind of like with just a jiu-jitsu background working as hard as the wrestlers? And I'm not trying to denigrate jiu-jitsu competitors, but I'm trying to kind of really, because I have a ton of respect for the hard work that wrestlers put in,
I think, it really depends individually. I've had wrestlers who just weren't as motivated to compete in jiu-jitsu, had a great, enjoyed jiu-jitsu, but didn't have that mindset, where on the other hand, I've had jiu-jitsu people who really put in the time and effort. So it's really been on an individual basis. Hard to make, I guess the wrestlers maybe were more used to that ramping it up in intensity. But I've had plenty of jiu-jitsu people who are ready to do that as well.
All right. Speaking of ramping it up, what's on the horizon for you from a competition standpoint? Do you still actively compete, or is that something that's still in your future?
Absolutely. I love competition. I see me competing as long as I can walk and breathe. I had to take off last year. It was the first time I've ever gone a whole year without competing because of my shoulder. I had a shoulder injury, and I'm going to have to get that surgically repaired, unfortunately, so it'll keep me out for a few more months. But once I come back from that, I will definitely get myself back competition ready and jump in the mix again. So that's why last year I mostly just refereed, but I definitely see myself competing again. Just got to get my body back where it needs to be.
What? How old are you, Dave?
48.
You're 48. What kind of advice would you give to jiu-jitsu competitors that are, I'm 42, you're 48, and you have all this world of competition experience? What kind of advice would you give the guy in his low, mid, upper 40s, early 50s if they want to start competing, or if they're still actively competing? Like, what kind of advice could Dave Jacobs give a competitor in our age brackets right now?
They certainly can continue an active competition lifestyle. I'm not going to be saying anything groundbreaking here. I'm sure you've heard it all before. But you do have to perhaps pay closer attention to your body. When you get injured, it does take a little longer to heal. You have to make sure you're properly warmed up. You have to be more in tune with your body. You can't, it's not like you're 20 years old, you can walk into the gym and boom, you're ready. And if you get injured, 2 days later, boom, you're healed up already.
Right.
It takes a little bit longer. Listen to your body. I guess that would be the main thing. You can't, this would apply to anybody. You can't expect to train once a week, once every other week, and expect to do well in competition. You have to put in the time. You have to make the commitment. That applies whether you're 20 or you're 50. So you do have to make the commitment, but you just have to be more careful, I guess, when you're older. Not that you can't do it, not that you can't push yourself as hard as you want. Just, be mindful.
So now, what things do you do outside of your jiu-jitsu training to help yourself stay sharp when you're actively competing?
Right. Well, before my shoulder injury, I was doing yoga several times a week. Um, I do hot room yoga, which I really love, but I haven't been able to do in months. But I want to get back to that as well. If I had more time on my schedule, I would do additional types of cross training, but mainly it was jiu-jitsu and yoga.
Okay. Any strength training when you were younger while you were competing, or is that kind of...
Yeah, I did. Before jiu-jitsu, during wrestling and the years after wrestling, I did mostly strength training. I was powerlifting, trying to compete, and I haven't really had, jiu-jitsu takes up so much time. I really don't have time to, jiu-jitsu in the family, I don't have time to lift weights like I used to. But that's, any type of cross training is good.
Okay.
Lifting weights, swimming, yoga,
So let's take it one step back. You're saying that this last year you haven't been able to compete because of your shoulder, but you've been refereeing a lot. And I know from personal experience, refereeing is a thankless and sometimes kind of grating position and job to have, because no matter what, somebody's going to be mad at you most of the time, and
Yes.
that kind of thing. The flip side of that is you get to see firsthand, best seat in the house, some amazing competition, Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, submission wrestling. So, what are the pros and cons for you of being a very well-respected number one, but also a high-level referee?
All right. Well, you've pretty much summarized it. It is the best seat in the house. I love it. If I can't compete, this is kind of like the next best thing to being in there. But it's a difficult job. There are people always yelling at you, even though at least half the time they don't know what the heck they're talking about. Telling you didn't make the call, you didn't give the points you should have awarded, or you awarded points you shouldn't have. And really, we say this all the time. It's almost cliche now, but get yourself to an IBJJF rule seminar, and then, if you want to yell at me, maybe I'll be more open to what you have to say. But so frequently, people don't know what they're talking about. But it's a lot of fun. It is stressful, but I really enjoy it. I've been refereeing since 2005. 9 years. Almost 10 years for the IBJJF. Do it a few times a year.
Now, have you ever had those moments where you're like, man, I wish I had a notepad to write down what just happened, or I can't wait to go back to see the video because I want to remember this one technique that this guy did, and I want to start teaching at my school? Because I remember having those moments as a referee.
Absolutely. There are things that I'll see that problem areas that certain blues or purple belts will have in a certain position, or a really nice technique that someone will do, but I'll go back and say to the students, look, I saw a lot of blue belts and purple belts have trouble with this position in several different matches, and I want to make sure you guys don't have this issue if you ever get here.
So there's a benefit for your students that you're kind of preventing them from falling within those same traps that maybe these other guys are having.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, Dave. I know we both have classes to teach today. I appreciate you being on. Any parting shots, anybody you'd like to thank, any sponsors, anything going on at your school that you'd like the community at large to kind of know about?
Boy, that's about a 3-hour answer right there. Just very, very thankful for my students, the way they've embraced the way the academy is going. It really, you just couldn't have a better group of students who all, like I said, have embraced this type of philosophy and are really just taking it on themselves to promote it as well. And my instructors Brendan and Abamar, who have also been a great part of it. Just bigger and better things in 2015. More classes coming. I guess I don't want to.
Okay, no seminars, no special events that you know of in the near future that we could promote?
Uh, Not yet. There's some seminars I want to give, but I have to repair my body first.
Okay.
And then I'll be happy to announce everywhere about the various seminars. Um, but that's it. I guess the only thing to I'll give a shout out to my friend Murillo Santana, who's opening up a school in New York. Um, the grand opening is at the end of this month. Murillo and I actually started jiu-jitsu together. We were white belts. We used to take private lessons together, and it's just been fantastic to watch him grow. And now he's a world champion, and he's also embracing a very similar philosophy with his academy that he's opening in New York.
He's a Unity Jiu-Jitsu. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And he's got the Meow brothers there, and Leander Lowe is going to be training up there for a while. But it's just great. I mean, he is, absolutely elite, top of the world level jiu-jitsu, but very good mindset about what a jiu-jitsu academy should be. So I'm happy to be a part of that, and I'm going to try to make it up for his grand opening.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, thank you for being on. I know some people have probably said this to you in the past, but the community appreciates you, and you're definitely one of the good guys. So thanks for pushing the sport along.
My pleasure. I do it because I love it. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to allow me to talk about myself for a little while, and hopefully people continue to watch Driving It Home with the Professor.
I appreciate that, and hopefully we get more people watching this than watch Steve Bowers' episode. That's
Who
my
would watch
goal.
Steve Bowers?
Yeah, nobody, as we could tell by the numbers. All right, Dave, thanks so much.
All right, take care.